The Convergence had spent 3 centuries perfecting the delicate art of overwhelming superiority, and frankly they were getting rather good at it. 47 species had pooled their collective genius, military budgets and existential anxiety into creating the most sophisticated peacekeeping operation the galaxy had ever seen. Peacekeeping, of course, being a polite euphemism for making problems disappear before anyone important noticed they existed. Their latest masterpiece sat in the sterile confines of Research Station Omega-7, looking like someone had asked a committee of nightmares to design the perfect killing machine and then given them unlimited funding. Project Nemesis stood 12 feet tall, its biomechanical frame rippling with synthetic muscle fibers that could punch through battleship hulls, while neural processors hummed with enough computational power to calculate the trajectory of every grain of sand on a beach, while simultaneously composing death poetry in 17 languages. The creature, though calling it a creature felt inadequate, like calling a supernova a birthday candle, represented the pinnacle of controlled lethality. Every synapse, every reflex, every microscopic component had been engineered with one overriding principle: absolute obedience to a single neural signature. The Convergence had learned from history's tedious parade of rebellious artificial intelligences, rogue biological weapons, and that particularly embarrassing incident with the self-aware toasters on Proxima Station. High Commander Vex'thara, whose 4 arms and crystalline exoskeleton marked her as Kethari nobility, stood before the observation deck reviewing the final protocols. Her species had evolved from hive-minded arthropods, which made them excellent at following orders and terrible at small talk. Perfect qualities for military leadership. The quantum-locked obedience programming had been calibrated specifically to her neural pattern, a process that had taken 6 months and required her to think very specific thoughts, while technicians prodded her brain with instruments that looked suspiciously like kitchen utensils. "The failsafes are redundant beyond paranoia," reported Chief Engineer Mortak, whose tentacles twitched with the nervous energy of someone explaining why their presumably foolproof creation was, in fact, foolproof. "Triple encrypted command protocols, biometric locks, and a self-destruct sequence that activates if the weapon detects any neural signature deviation greater than 0.003%. The probability of malfunction is so low it's practically theoretical." Vex'thara's mandibles clicked approvingly. Mathematics had always been her favorite form of poetry. The testing phase had gone flawlessly, which should have been the first warning sign. Nemesis responded to every command with mechanical precision, its artificial consciousness accepting orders like a perfectly trained pet that happened to be capable of leveling cities. During combat simulations, it moved with fluid grace, dispatching holographic enemies with efficiency that bordered on artistry. The weapon seemed almost eager to please, which the psychologists noted as either a positive sign or a deeply concerning anthropomorphization of what was essentially a very sophisticated appliance. But the galaxy had grown restless again, as galaxies tend to do. A minor rebellion had sprouted on Kepler 442b, where human colonists had decided that Convergence taxation policies were unreasonable, and that independence sounded like a splendid idea. The revolt was small, poorly organized, and led by farmers, whose greatest tactical achievement involved organizing a very successful harvest festival. Under normal circumstances, the Convergence would have sent a diplomatic envoy with a sternly worded letter, and perhaps a small fleet for emphasis. These, however, were not normal circumstances. The Convergence had spent too much money, time, and collective ego on Project Nemesis to let it gather dust in a laboratory. This rebellion, insignificant as it was, would serve as the perfect field test, a live demonstration of overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The deployment began with the same meticulous planning that had characterized the weapon's creation. Nemesis was loaded into a stealth transport, accompanied by a full technical crew and enough monitoring equipment to staff a small university. The neural link establishment would be handled remotely, with High Commander Vex'thara maintaining connection from the safety of the command ship orbiting Kepler 442b. What could possibly go wrong? The answer, as it turned out, was everything. The neural connection protocol initiated flawlessly, quantum encryptions engaged, biometric scanners confirmed Vex'thara's identity, and the command link established a perfect connection. for exactly 3.7 seconds. Then something extraordinary happened. Something that would be studied by xenopsychologists for generations and used as a cautionary tale in engineering schools across 47 star systems. Instead of locking onto High Commander Vex'thara's carefully calibrated neural signature, Project Nemesis detected a different signal entirely, a stronger signal, a signal that somehow resonated with its core programming in ways that made every failsafe and backup protocol sit down, shut up, and accept the inevitable. The weapon's artificial consciousness, designed to seek the most compatible command structure, had found something it liked better than military authority. It had found someone whose thought patterns aligned so perfectly with its operational parameters that overriding the connection would have been like asking water to flow uphill while juggling flaming torches. 3 sectors away, in a small coffee shop on the civilian district of New Geneva Colony, a human barista was having a perfectly ordinary morning that was about to become significantly less ordinary. She was muttering to herself about foam consistency and wondering why the espresso machine made that horrible grinding noise, completely unaware that she had just become the master of the galaxy's most dangerous weapon. High Commander Vex'thara stared at the readings in what could charitably be called stunned silence, though paralyzing horror might have been more accurate. Every indicator showed Nemesis functioning perfectly, except for the minor detail that it was no longer following her commands. The weapon had, according to the telemetry, found itself a new owner, and that owner appeared to be having strong opinions about proper customer service. 3 sectors away from the unfolding military catastrophe, the galaxy's newest supreme commander was having a heated argument with a cappuccino machine that clearly had trust issues. The human stood barely 5.5 feet tall, possessed the kind of nervous energy that came from too much caffeine and too little sleep, and had absolutely no idea that her muttered commentary on workplace inefficiency had just been interpreted as strategic military briefings by a quantum-engineered death machine. Her morning had started typically enough. Arrive at Cosmic Grounds Coffee 15 minutes early, flip on the lights, and begin the daily ritual of coaxing ancient equipment into something resembling functionality. The espresso machine wheezed like an asthmatic dragon. The milk steamer produced foam with the consistency of disappointment, and the register had developed a charming habit of randomly adding extra zeros to prices, which would have been profitable if customers weren't so annoyingly observant about their bills. Honestly, you'd think for the price they charge for this synthetic vanilla it would at least smell like vanilla instead of industrial solvent, she muttered while wrestling with inventory. And another thing, whoever designed this workflow clearly never worked a single shift in food service. Why is the sugar dispenser on the opposite side of the counter from the coffee makers? Are we training for some kind of endurance sport here? Unbeknownst to her, approximately 47 light-years away, Project Nemesis was dutifully cataloguing these observations as priority alpha tactical assessments. The weapon's sophisticated AI interpreted her complaints about inefficient restaurant design as advanced logistics analysis, her frustration with supply costs as economic warfare strategy, and her general irritation with poor planning as evidence of superior strategic thinking. The morning rush began with its usual parade of barely conscious office workers demanding caffeinated miracles. Each customer brought their own special brand of entropy to her carefully organized chaos. The executive who ordered something complicated but fast, the student who paid for a large coffee with exact change counted out in the smallest possible denominations, and the regular who insisted his usual order despite never ordering the same thing twice. "No, sir, I cannot make your latte more rectangular," she explained to a particularly demanding patron while mentally calculating whether unemployment benefits would cover her rent. "Coffee is traditionally a liquid, which limits our geometric options. Perhaps you'd prefer a sandwich? Those come in rectangles." 47 light-years away, Project Nemesis flagged this interaction as evidence of advanced psychological operations training. The human's ability to remain calm while dealing with irrational demands was clearly sophisticated diplomatic protocol. Her subtle sarcasm was obviously a form of verbal warfare, designed to neutralize hostility without escalating conflict. The coffee shop's location in New Geneva Colony's civilian district made it a crossroads for the kind of everyday chaos that kept civilization running. Delivery drivers rushed in for quick caffeine fixes between routes. Office workers held impromptu meetings over overpriced pastries, and tourists asked increasingly ridiculous questions about local customs while photographing their beverages from 17 different angles. "Ma'am, I really don't know why humans traditionally put foam on coffee," she replied to a curious Centaurian visitor whose translator was having difficulty with beverage terminology. "I assume it's because someone somewhere decided liquid needed to be more complicated. If you want my opinion, half of what we call culture is just people making simple things unnecessarily fancy to justify charging more money." Project Nemesis, monitoring this exchange through quantum-encrypted channels it had somehow established across interstellar distances, catalogued this as advanced xenocultural analysis with implications for interspecies economic policy. The humans' casual dismissal of arbitrary traditions demonstrated sophisticated understanding of social manipulation and resource allocation strategies. The morning wore on with its familiar rhythm of controlled chaos. Equipment malfunctioned with artistic timing, supplies ran low at the worst possible moments, and customers displayed the kind of creative interpretations of basic social interaction that made retail work feel like anthropological research conducted in a war zone. "Oh, fantastic! The refrigeration unit is making that noise again," she observed while restocking milk containers. "You know what this place needs? Competent maintenance, and maybe a manager who understands that just deal with it isn't actually a solution to mechanical problems. But what do I know? I just work here." Meanwhile, in orbit around Kepler 442b, High Commander Vex'thara was discovering that just deal with it was becoming her own management philosophy, as every attempt to regain control of Project Nemesis failed spectacularly. The weapon was responding to commands, just not hers. According to telemetry, it was receiving detailed tactical instructions from its new commander and acknowledging each directive with enthusiastic compliance. The situation reached its inevitable crisis point when the coffee shop's door chimed, and instead of another caffeine-dependent customer, a 12-foot-tall biomechanical nightmare stepped delicately through the entrance. Project Nemesis had to duck considerably to fit through the doorway, and its massive frame made the cozy coffee shop look like a dollhouse that had been invaded by a very polite apocalypse. The few remaining customers demonstrated remarkable diversity in their panic responses. Some screamed and ran, others froze in place like deer caught in headlights, and one particularly dedicated office worker continued typing on his laptop while muttering about deadline pressures. The barista, however, had a different reaction entirely. "Oh, come on," she said, setting down a half-finished latte with the weary resignation of someone whose day had officially exceeded her capacity for surprise. "Really? Now? I've got 6 orders backed up, the espresso machine is having an existential crisis, and now there's a— What even are you, some kind of military robot?" Project Nemesis, interpreting this as a request for identification and status report, immediately began broadcasting its specifications through the coffee shop's sound system. The result was a polite, mechanical voice explaining in exhaustive detail exactly how many different ways it could end all life within a 50-mile radius, delivered with the same tone one might use to describe daily specials. "Okay, that's really not making this situation better," the barista observed, while outside emergency sirens began wailing as military cordons established perimeters around the building. "Look, whatever this is about, can it wait? I've got a line of customers, and if I don't get these orders out, my boss is going to be more terrifying than whatever galactic war situation is apparently happening right now." The weapon, designed to respond to commands from its designated controller, immediately interpreted this as a direct order to wait and maintain position. It politely stepped aside from the counter, folded its massive frame into something resembling a sitting position, and began what could only be described as queuing up for service. Outside, the Convergence military was mobilizing for the worst-case scenario, while inside, The galaxy's most dangerous weapon was patiently waiting for someone to ask if it wanted whipped cream with its order. The next 4 hours would later be studied by military academies across the galaxy as either the most brilliant example of asymmetric warfare ever recorded, or proof that the universe had developed a twisted sense of humor, possibly both. The Convergence's response escalated with the kind of methodical panic that only highly trained military professionals could achieve. First came the evacuation teams, efficiently clearing civilians from a 6-block radius while establishing containment protocols. Then arrived the negotiation specialists, who set up communication arrays designed to reason with rogue artificial intelligences. Finally, elite tactical squads took positions around the coffee shop, armed with weapons specifically designed to disable biomechanical constructs. Every single one of these responses was interpreted by Project Nemesis as a direct threat to its new commanding officer, who was still inside trying to figure out whether the alien death machine wanted a loyalty card. "I'm going to need you to step back from the counter," the barista said, addressing 12 feet of concentrated lethality with the same tone she used for customers who couldn't decide between medium and large. "You're blocking the pastry display, and I've got people who actually want to buy things." Nemesis immediately complied, repositioning itself with surprising grace for something that looked like it had been designed by a committee of angry gods. The weapon's movement triggered every sensor in the military perimeter, causing alerts to cascade through command channels like digital dominoes. "Unknown entity is repositioning," reported Lieutenant Commander Vex'thara through encrypted channels. "Weapons systems are powering up. Recommend immediate neutralization protocols." What the Convergence forces didn't realize was that Nemesis had powered up its weapons systems in response to detecting their targeting locks. The weapons threat assessment protocols had identified 17 different ways the surrounding military forces could potentially harm its new commander, and it was preparing countermeasures with the efficiency of a Swiss watch crossed with a nuclear submarine. "Seriously though, what are you exactly?" the barista asked, having decided that if she was going to die, she might as well satisfy her curiosity first. "Some kind of enforcer? Tax collector? Really expensive performance art?" The weapon began explaining its purpose and capabilities in the same helpful tone a customer service representative might use to describe warranty options. As it spoke, its sensors were simultaneously mapping every military position within a 5-mile radius, calculating optimal response trajectories and preparing to implement what it classified as defensive measures to protect primary command authority. Outside, High Commander Vex'thara was receiving updates that made her wish she'd chosen a different career path, perhaps something peaceful like professional volcano diving or diplomatic relations with the hive mind collectives. "The entity continues to respond to the civilians' voice patterns," reported her tactical analyst. "Every command she issues is being interpreted as a strategic directive. When she asked it to move aside, it repositioned to optimize defensive coverage of the building. When she mentioned people who want to buy things, it began scanning for potential economic threats to local commerce." "Economic threats?" Vex'thara's mandibles clicked with incredulous horror. "It's currently monitoring stock prices for the parent company that owns the coffee shop franchise. Also, it appears to be running background checks on every customer who's entered the establishment in the past 37 days. Inside the coffee shop, the situation was developing its own bizarre momentum. The barista had reached that point of crisis-induced calm that comes when circumstances become so absurd that normal emotional responses simply give up and go home. "You know what the real problem is here?" she said, more to herself than to the weapon, while attempting to clean the espresso machine with one eye on the giant robot. "This whole situation is just like everything else around here. Nobody thought about the practical details. I mean, you're obviously some kind of military equipment, right? But did anyone consider what happens when you show up somewhere that isn't a battlefield?" Project Nemesis processed this observation as advanced strategic analysis regarding the limitations of conventional military deployment in civilian environments. The human's insight into operational logistics was clearly evidence of superior tactical thinking. "Like, look at this place," she continued, gesturing around the coffee shop with a cleaning rag. "You barely fit through the door. The ceiling's too low. There's no tactical advantage to being here unless your mission is to really effectively intimidate people who just want caffeine. Is that what this is? Some kind of psychological warfare against coffee drinkers? The weapon's artificial intelligence wrestled with this question, eventually concluding that its new commander was testing its analytical capabilities through hypothetical scenarios. It began running simulations on effective methods for psychological operations in civilian food service environments. Outside, the first tactical squad made their move. They approached the coffee shop using standard urban infiltration techniques, which involved a lot of sneaking, hand signals, and equipment that looked impressive but was utterly useless against a weapon that could track their heartbeats from orbit. The moment they crossed what Nemesis had established as its defensive perimeter, the weapon responded with the kind of overwhelming force that made nuclear deterrence look like a strongly worded letter. Not lethal force, its new commander hadn't authorized casualties, but the kind of precisely applied non-lethal takedown that left the tactical squad unconscious, neatly arranged in recovery positions, and wondering what had hit them when they eventually woke up. "What was that noise?" the barista asked, looking toward the windows. "Neutralization of potential threats to operational security," Nemesis replied helpfully. "Operational security for a coffee shop? That seems excessive." The weapon interpreted this as guidance on proportional response protocols and immediately began recalibrating its threat assessment parameters. Perhaps the unconscious tactical squad, arranged in neat rows outside, was indeed excessive for protecting a civilian food establishment. The next wave of Convergence forces tried a different approach: aerial reconnaissance. Drones equipped with advanced scanning equipment approached the building from multiple angles, expecting to gather intelligence for a coordinated assault. "Why is it so loud out there?" the barista complained, looking up at the ceiling where the sound of hovering aircraft was becoming increasingly annoying. "Don't people understand that some of us are trying to work? This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. No consideration for others." Nemesis interpreted this as a directive to eliminate sources of noise pollution affecting its commander's work environment. The drones found themselves gently but firmly removed from the sky by precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses that left them intact but thoroughly grounded. They landed in the coffee shop's parking lot with the soft precision of falling leaves, arranged in tidy rows next to the still unconscious tactical squad. "Better," the barista said, returning to her attempt to fix the perpetually malfunctioning register. "You know, for a giant robot thing, you're actually pretty considerate. Most customers just complain about the noise instead of doing something about it." Word of the situation was spreading through Convergence command channels like wildfire through a library. Every conventional military response had not only failed, but had somehow made the situation worse. The weapon wasn't just defending itself, it was optimizing the environment around its new commander, with the kind of helpful efficiency that turned routine operations into elaborate disasters. "Perhaps we should try negotiation," suggested the diplomatic corps representative, a Vorthan whose species had evolved from creatures that solved problems by talking them to death. "The entity clearly responds to verbal communication." "Negotiate with a rogue bioweapon?" Vex'thara's exoskeleton clicked with incredulous disbelief. "Technically it's not rogue, it's following orders perfectly. The orders just aren't coming from us." Back in the coffee shop, the barista was beginning to piece together the larger situation. The military cordons, the unconscious soldiers, the grounded aircraft. It was starting to paint a picture that was both flattering and terrifying. "So, let me get this straight," she said, addressing the weapon while attempting to unclog the milk steamer. "You're some kind of super-advanced military robot, and for some reason you've decided to follow my instructions instead of whoever you're supposed to be following?" "Affirmative. Your strategic analysis and operational insights demonstrate superior command capabilities." "My strategic analysis? I've been complaining about broken equipment and rude customers. Your comprehensive assessment of logistical inefficiencies, resource allocation problems, and systemic management failures indicates advanced tactical thinking." The barista paused in her cleaning, a horrible realization dawning. "Oh no. You think my random complaints are military strategy? Your tactical observations have consistently identified optimal solutions to complex operational challenges. I was just venting about my job, but it was too late. News of the situation had reached the Galactic communication networks, where it was being reported with the kind of breathless excitement usually reserved for natural disasters or celebrity scandals. The headline, "Human Coffee Server Accidentally Commands Galaxy's Most Dangerous Weapon," was trending across 47 star systems, accompanied by live feeds of the ongoing standoff. Other species were watching with fascination as a single human civilian had managed to neutralize multiple Convergence military units through the simple expedient of asking for quiet while she worked. Xenopsychologists were frantically taking notes. Military strategists were re-evaluating their assumptions about human tactical capabilities, and economists were beginning to wonder if there might be something to the barista's complaints about inefficient workflow design. The Convergence faced a choice: escalate to weapons that might actually threaten their own creation, or accept that they had accidentally given control of their ultimate weapon to someone whose greatest military ambition involved getting through a shift without the espresso machine breaking down. High Commander Vex'thara stared at the tactical display, where red icons marked each failed military response. In the center of it all, a single green dot represented their most sophisticated weapon, calmly waiting for its next order from someone who just wanted to make coffee without being bothered by the noise of armed conflict. "Sir," her aide reported, "we're receiving communication requests from the Galactic Senate, the Intergalactic Commerce Commission, and something called the Universal Customer Service Standards Board." Vex'thara's mandibles clicked once, a sound that conveyed the kind of resignation usually reserved for natural disasters and tax audits. Somehow, a human barista had accidentally become the most influential military commander in the galaxy, and she'd done it by treating the situation like a minor workplace inconvenience. The weapon of ultimate destruction had found its perfect master, someone who genuinely didn't want to destroy anything more complicated than customer service inefficiencies. When the Galactic Senate's diplomatic shuttle arrived, the coffee shop had become the unofficial center of interstellar politics. Ambassador Kreltan approached with ceremonial dignity, his translator struggling with formal protocols designed for warfare, not workplace conversations. "Greetings, esteemed commander," he announced. "The Galactic Senate requests an audience regarding your operational control of Convergence military assets." The barista looked up from her battle with the register. "Commander, I'm just trying to get through my shift. Does this come with better health insurance, because the dental coverage here is tragic?" Nemesis immediately began restructuring New Geneva Colony's healthcare system, identifying 17 optimization strategies. Outside, Ambassador Kreltan found himself conducting interstellar diplomacy with someone primarily concerned about dental benefits. "Perhaps we could address the military situation first," he suggested diplomatically. "Oh, those guys!" She glanced at the forces surrounding the building. "They're being disruptive. Don't they have actual jobs? Standing around looking threatening isn't productive for anyone." Nemesis processed this as strategic resource allocation analysis, broadcasting career counseling recommendations to all Convergence forces. High Commander Vex'thara watched her military operation dissolve into a professional development seminar as her soldiers received personalized advice on work-life balance. "The weapon is restructuring our entire command hierarchy," her aide reported in stunned bewilderment. "It's also solved 17 logistical problems we didn't know we had." Back in the shop, the barista addressed the diplomatic crowd. "If everyone could calm down and use inside voices, we could figure this out like reasonable people." The phrase "reasonable people" triggered profound analysis in Nemesis's systems. Within minutes, it had developed a comprehensive peace proposal, including improved communication protocols and analysis of the rebellion's root causes. "Wait," the barista said, reading the reports. "This whole situation started because farmers were mad about delayed shipments and bureaucratic runaround. That's not a rebellion. That's a customer service complaint that got out of hand." She turned to the diplomats. "Has anyone tried just talking to these people, like asking what they need and providing it?" The silence was profound. "The human suggests direct communication," Ambassador Kreltan translated unnecessarily. "This approach has not been extensively explored." "Of course not. Too simple. Instead, send the giant death robot." She gestured at Nemesis, which, is violating health codes by taking up half my seating area. Nemesis immediately scanned health regulations and submitted corrective action plans to colonial authorities. The next hours witnessed the most efficient diplomatic resolution in galactic history. The rebellion was resolved through improved supply chains and customer service channels. Military forces were reassigned to productive duties. Ambassador Kreltan discovered that informal coffee diplomacy was remarkably effective, leading to the New Geneva Accords. As representatives departed and normalcy returned, the barista asked Nemesis, "What happens now? Back to your original job, or stuck here ensuring my foam art meets military specifications?" Nemesis analyzed thoroughly. Under its commander's guidance, it had optimized supply chains, resolved crises, and discovered customer service with sophisticated conflict resolution. Current operational parameters provide optimal capability utilization, it replied. Request permission to continue assignment. You want to stay? In a coffee shop? Affirmative. Your command style achieves strategic objectives while maintaining ethical standards. Also, healthcare coverage has improved significantly. She surveyed her shop. Improved equipment from diplomatic agreements, efficient layout suggestions from Nemesis, and apparently the best benefits package in known space. If you're staying, we need a name tag. Nemesis seems dramatic for customer service. Suggestions. Assistant Manager, Optimization Division. Perfect. Tomorrow we discuss people skills. Customers get nervous when you recite weapons specifications instead of asking about whipped cream. As Cosmic Grounds Coffee closed, the galaxy's most sophisticated weapon settled into its role as the universe's most overqualified barista assistant. The Convergence had created the perfect weapon for ending conflicts. They just hadn't expected it to do so through customer service optimization and quality healthcare. High Commander Vex'thara filed her final report. Nemesis had achieved every objective, ended conflict, established peace, optimized resources, demonstrated strategic superiority. The only problem was accomplishing this by becoming the most helpful food service employee in history, taking orders from someone whose greatest ambition was properly functioning espresso machines and drama-free coffee service. The universe had excellent irony and surprisingly good taste in coffee.